Hello and welcome. Welcome to our Shadowdark Session 0. Hi, I'm Andy from Twisted Narrative, and we've got some faces which I hope very much will become very familiar to you. These are the volunteers that have put themselves forward to delve into the Shadowdark and explore this, I think, absolutely awesome old school gaming system, but with all of the very neat new school mechanics. So first and foremost, this is going to be a session 0. We've all talked before, but we kind of want to share the kind of conversations that we've had, and I think it might well be useful to new GMs out there to sort of listen to the conversations that we're having, to how to form the foundation of what hopefully is going to be a mini campaign. But before we do that, let's do some introductions, and we'll go clockwise. So I don't know whether I'm the only one that can see the screen. We will go across to Fliss. Please tell us a little bit about you. Who are you? You can talk about how you met me, whatever.
So Andy, it's lovely to be here. I'm Liz. I'm a very avid tabletop role player. I play with Andy in a regular game that we've been having for more than a year now. It's been really strong. It's quite fun. I approached Andy with a character concept from my husband and I as a pair of characters, and he has got an entire adventure based.
Your
That was amazing. So
audio's
his style of gaming.
Your audio's a bit robotic there, I'm afraid. We didn't quite clear that. We'll see if you can get a better signal.
No.
That's okay. We'll come back to you in a moment. We'll move down directly below you. Malcolm.
Good evening. My name's Malcolm. Been playing Dungeons & Dragons and various other role-playing games for a good 25 years now. Was a regular-ish at Andy's shop, Chimera, back in Beeston.
I do need to just quickly say, because I value my marriage, it wasn't just my shop, it was Heather's, who was my wife and business partner. Big shout out to her. She is the power behind the throne. This is for my own self-preservation more than anything else. But yeah, we did meet at Chimera. Sorry, carry on.
Very fair, and yes, and also the pleasure of meeting your wife.
Yeah.
Very interested in Shadowdark. Have been following the Arcane library since Kelsey started launching early products for 5e. We've mentioned it already. I will not forget my introduction of D&D being the old red box set. This feels like it's going to be in the same direction without some of the old school challenges.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you sort of mentioned that. Because it's definitely sort of rose-tinted glasses. It's definitely, I have such good memories of those games back in the early 80s. But you kind of look at the mechanics today and I certainly go, what? I played this. So it's very interesting, and this is why I'm crazy, sort of obsessed with Shadowdark at the moment, because for me it has got that feel when I was playing as a lad, but with all the cool mechanics that made the game actually function. So yeah, super good. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Malcolm. Then we'll tick round to Kyle. Tell us a bit about you.
Well, I'm Kyle. I've been role-playing primarily 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons for around 5 years. I had my first game with Andy. It's unfortunately now been hooked and on far too many games for me to admit.
You can never have too many games. Never.
Starting to branch out a bit more, enjoying Cthulhu, and Andy's enthusiasm for this has become rather contagious. Had to give it a go.
I genuinely, I'm super anxious tonight because I want it to be what I think it is. I think it will be, but we will see. Last but not least, Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian. I met Andy, like so many others, at Chimera, although I came to that quite late in the life of the shop. I've been playing role-playing games probably 20 years now. I cut my teeth on text-based games online in the days following after the release of the original Fellowship of the Ring movies. Moved into Old World of Darkness and played on a lot of those servers back in those days of writing. Got quite an enjoyment out of creating a narrative, more than the mechanics, and had quite a slump until I met Andy at Chimera, played in a couple of his games, and so got into 5th edition and then a couple of other things since. I've never actually played any of the older style of games, and so I'm interested in Shadowdark as a sort of get a feel for what that was like.
Yeah.
Back in the early '80s when I was, 2.
Making me feel very old. But I mean, the thing about Shadowdark is it definitely has a nod to those old games, but it's a new game. I mean, this is the great thing about it. Um, so I don't think it's a retro game in any way. I think it's very forward thinking, and I genuinely believe that it's a new way of approaching gaming rather than having these weighted tomes with tons of rules that try and explain every nuance to a game world or a setting or how the system works. It's gone, hey, have some fun, use your imagination, be creative. And this is why I'm very, very excited with you. And just as to be like perfectly transparent here, what's awesome about this is whilst I'm the common connector from these 4 awesome people, they've never met before. We've just done a little bit of character generation, so this is like a true gathering of new players, not new to role playing but new to each other. And it's going to be a test of this system and a test of kind of this session 0 as well. This is not a faked stream of sorts. This is real time nonsense, and things are going to go wrong, things are going to go right, and hopefully we're all here for the ride of it. So why session 0? Is it important? Isn't it important? Should you jump in? Well, I believe it's very important. I think you need to sort of gauge the expectations of your players. I think all the players and the GM need to be on the same page for the game. And I've run some games that haven't really had a strong session 0 or session 0 at all. And I kind of knew all of the players. And there's been some problems with them. Having all the games with a clear view of the way forward and how everybody's going to maximize their fun at the table is kind of what you want, both as a GM and a player. So essential, really. On top of making sure everybody's having fun, it's also important to be sensitive, feel anything that might trigger players, uncover their lines and veils, and also get the very feel of the campaign itself. So that is why we need session 0s, why I think they are important. One of the first ways that you can do this, especially if the players don't know each other particularly well, is kind of to get them to talk about the things that they like. A simple question is such as, what is one thing that you like about role-playing games? And this kind of breaks the ice, but also allows you to learn about expectations and what the players are perhaps looking for. Let us see if your audio is better, Fliss. Let us know one thing that you like about role playing, not necessarily what we're going to have here, but what draws you to it.
So I think one of my favorite things about games involving dice is the randomness and the co-creation of a narrative through complete and utter randomness. So I do find games and groups and systems that kind of minimize that randomness, I enjoy that a lot less. That's one of the things I'm excited about for Shadowdark.
It's that's a strong like, and gets a big thumbs up for me. I like the dice to help tell a story. You know this, you're in my games, and as a GM, I do open dice rolls for good or bad, and believe me, it's you know, I feel for the players when I roll, for instance, 3 6s, just before they start rolling their characters. That happened. We didn't have it on record, but it was a shock to me as much as everybody else. But I like open dice rolls, and I do like the dice to help tell the tale. Malcolm, how about you?
Going to sound somewhat familiar. I'm a narrative storyteller. Can get cinematic at times, people tell me. So let's have a grand adventure. And if that's digging in the dark of the maze of the rat runs and things like that, that's one great environment for doing it in. But I've done it in all sorts of different environments in many different game systems over time. But it is that connection you create around the table when you're telling a story.
Yeah, absolutely. I love my cinematics as well, and hopefully with this Shadowdark that a lot of people are questioning, is it only just a dungeon crawler? I'm very much hoping that we can bring to our game cinematics as well. Absolutely. And I think with the fact that it's rules light, that is going to help with cinematics. I did a previous very short Shadowdark chat where I was basically saying less is more, and that sometimes having rules, they not only tell you how you interact with a game world, they tell you how you can't interact with the game world. So cutting through all of that is it's enlightening. So dice telling the story or helping to, and cinematics. I'm loving this already. We do have 2 other players. What's the one thing that you would shout out about, Kyle?
Shout out about the characters themselves. It's, for example, I don't consider myself a particularly outgoing or social player, but I enjoy playing high charisma based swashbuckling rogue going out and charming people. Well, trying to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We are, I think, a lot of people are drawn to role playing for escapism and for playing the characters as we've designed, and for engaging in that cinematic world. And I love the way that characters interact, and I do like people immersing themselves and getting attached to their characters as well. When characters mean something more than just a playing piece, it is one of the strengths, I think, of a role-playing game. Otherwise you could play a war game or a board game or a card game and still get that buzz about having a playing piece and moving around and doing things with it. One of the unique things about role playing is you can become immersed in this environment and become that character for a few hours and leave all of your normal day things, put them behind you, sort of thing, really. So I'm looking forward. You've got a very interesting character that we have seen, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that shines in this darkness. Brian.
Well, to avoid sounding repetitive, because again, the people before me have talked about narrative and characters and all the rest of that. I remember in the first game I played in Andy's setting in the smoke, I was playing an orc bard in the smoke itself, and he was sort of this rabble rouser, wanted to unionize the workers, all that sort of stuff. And through the course of the short campaign and my involvement in it, the factory where he worked was attacked and blown up. And, the characters went through that excitement and all the rest of that. And, as game sessions go, we were getting towards the end of it and like, right, well, that's the end of the day. What, everybody goes off back to their town, to where they're sleeping for the night or where they're lodging. I said that my character, the name escapes me. He goes back to the factory and he just stands there and then he starts stacking the bricks up, making this effort to sort of rebuild this thing because he's lost the place he worked. He's lost a lot of friends he works with. And in the end, he gets this little stack of bricks and then he sits on it and he just starts crying. And I thought, that's a powerful moment where you've got this big, hulking, huge orc who's just so overcome with the emotions of what's happened that, I thought that was a real interesting character beat.
Yeah.
And it's that sort of stuff that interests me.
Yeah, no, 100% again, and I'm really pleased that you raised that. I mean, the great thing about gaming like that is you're not just internalizing it as a self. The rest of the table can see that, and it's telling a story, and they are drawn into that character story as well. And it's fantastic to see that level of engagement, not just from you playing that character, but drawing in the entirety of the table as well. Um, and for me, that is what role playing is about: is telling strong stories, whether it's heroics delving in the dark or other tales. And we are going to be telling some tales from the smoke very, very soon. So, in terms of session 0, you can see that kind of asking those questions as perhaps gave the GM and the rest of the table expectations of the things that other players like. And we're all here to have fun, so hopefully everybody embraces those ideas. I don't think any one of those ideas is particularly clashing with another one. In fact, I think they're all on the same page and pushing in exactly the right direction, or rather the same direction, which is kind of what you want to know, you know, from day one, really. So the next thing to sort of move on to, which is kind of not applicable here, but if you're running a game, is kind of scheduling, really. You know, how often are we going to play this game? Is it campaign? Is it a one shot? If it's a campaign, are we doing it weekly? Are we doing it once a month? What days are we going to meet up from? How many hours are we planning to play? All of this information is important, because one of the things that kills a game faster than anything else is no shows. People scheduling kind of clashes, people can't make it. And it's a real shame, because everybody could be enjoying it, but real life just gets into the way, and the campaign folds. I've had many campaigns ending up like that, just because of real life issues. In terms of this game, we don't really need to discuss about that. We are going to do probably a short sort of prologue, and we'll be not live streaming, but that will be an actual play. We're recording it for you. And then, provided everybody's on board with it, we're going to meet up in a fortnight's time. And now that we've got all of the characters generated, we will truly delve into the game properly. Is everybody okay with that? Yeah, we good for that. But as I say, it's not overly applicable here. But if I was running this as a session 0, and if it was an extended campaign, this is a lot of the questions that I would certainly be asking, and making sure people don't overcommit. You would much prefer to look, if you're not sure we can do it weekly, should we do it fortnightly, etc., etc. And again, it establishes people's expectations. So scheduling would be the next thing that I would talk about. And then thirdly, table expectations. some of these are applicable for online games, some of them are not, but kind of things like should people drink, should people be eating food at the table, all of these kind of things. What kind of things do you want from the game? Do you want it to be fully dramatic in character? Do you want it to be funny? Do you want it to be scary? How much sort of narrative control would you like agency as players to be able to go, can I add something here? How about player versus player? Should players be allowed to attack, or is this something that we're drawing a line straight through and there is no player versus player? We'll just all get on with it. Another important thing, what is, if this was a movie, what is the rating of the game? Is it going to be a PG, an R-rated game, or something in between? There's a lot there that I've mentioned, and probably much more that you can think of about table expectations. In terms of the group that we have here, we've discussed quite a few of these things already, so we're not going to necessarily go over old ground. But one of the questions that was raised was the certificate, if this was a movie. Does anybody have any particular feelings about that? I'm more than happy for it to be of either scale or in the middle. Most of you have played in my games before, so you kind of know I tend to go for a slightly R-rated games, but I can tone things down should people want.
It all comes down to how appropriate it is.
Yeah.
In the moment, how does my character actually feel? Going back to the sat on the rocks in an emotive state, you're going to react as that character very differently. If you are just throwing trash language out there to think you're funny doing it, then no, you're going to put the group on edge. It's not going to be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm sat in the heels of my character, is how I think on it, then I might express myself honestly.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the game finds its neutral ground. You're quite right. We're all adults. We might have enough moments that a film review board would tell you that has made it not going to certificate PG-13. But I think that's something that the group checks in on 3 weeks, 3 sessions down the line and goes, has anybody felt that the game has grown beyond that anticipated starting of, let's just be honest, characters?
Yeah. Is everybody okay with that around the table?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. I don't have any sort of issues with that as well. And just to clarify, I have reached out to all our players already and asked them if they are triggered by anything or what their lines and veils are. This is not something I'm going to discuss here, but I'm obviously aware of such things. And as a GM, it's the right thing to do to have private conversations with your players to make sure that you're not going to be doing something that is going to cause them any distress, basically. Common sense. And you can, as a new GM or even as an old GM, believe that, oh, I know these people, I know what's going to do. You don't know. Believe me, you really don't know. I've kind of seen it all, and you kind of go, oh, really? Okay. Thank you for telling me. It's honest, mature discussion, and it's all held privately, but subjects to avoid, absolutely. And I definitely recommend, if you do have a session zero, or even if you don't, this is like the minimum that you do with your gaming group. So from table expectations, we move to campaign framework, and this is a really interesting one. In terms of, you can, if you want to be have an open shared world with your players, have these discussions. You might be the kind of GM that has created this perfectly crafted world, and you're kind of saying to the players, well, this is the setting I want you to sort of play in, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I would suggest, even if you're doing that, is send out a primer, ask them if they've got any comments and thoughts, so they can start thinking about how the characters that they'll be making can fit into this game world. What you can also do, if you haven't got a set idea of a setting, is sort of create it together a little bit. Sort of say, oh, you're going to play an elf. Whereabouts would you be from? What is, are you leaning into the sort of Feywild and the Fey side, or are you leaning more into the Underdark? You can start getting a feel for their characters, and this helps tie the characters to the world from the go, basically, which is really nice. It makes them involved in the game, feel they're part of it from session one. So what I'm going to do here for our characters, and we are coming to the end of our session 0 very soon, is to sort of ask you a few sort of questions, really. Hopefully you've all read the primer of the smoke, and you've kind of got a little bit of a feel from it. And I'm going to start with Brian, actually, because it's always worse going last, because everybody says all the really cool stuff that you've thought of, and it's like, okay, but you get to go first. I would like you to do two things, and if you're not sure, that's fine. But is there a guild or an NPC that you think that your character can be tied with within the smoke, or at least has some kind of relationship with? That's question number one. Same question to everybody else. And the second question is, I just want you to choose one of the other characters. It can be more, but for this session 0, just one of them. And how do you know them? It could be for good or it could be for ill, but how are you aware of them?
Well, how I know the other characters, unfortunately, I'm going to have to defer on that until we have actually introduced the characters.
That's okay.
As far as the guild, I would have to. I know. I can say right away that stat generation for the Shadowdark has been incredibly entertaining, because I've never had a character with such terrible stats before. I don't consider myself sort of this min-max power gamer. I like to follow the narrative, but of the classic 6 stats, I have 2 that are above 12, and like 3 that are in single digits. So I've created, and again, using some of the random tables in Shadowdark's for background, I rolled Magician's Apprentice. He's got an intelligence of like 8. So he's a failed Magician's Apprentice. So I would have to check up on those guilds of which one's more likely to be involved in arcane stuff.
The Potter's Guild is the guild of magic in the smoke. The Potter's Guild obviously make pots, but they have branched out into all schools of magic. So you could have easily an old master from there. I mean, just because you failed, this is your own narrative agency, doesn't mean you're disliked. I mean, maybe they wanted you to pass and you just, for some reasons, maybe the reason why your intelligence is so low is because someone cursed you. Maybe there was shenanigans going on. This is the great thing about Shadowdark and these rolling, is how to rationalize these rolls. And you can speak to me sort of privately. We can come up with something really quite cool. But the Potter's Guild then. Yeah.
I mean, just as you're saying, I'm thinking, it's a guild. It's going to need other, it's not just going to be wizards. They're going to need guards, laborers, merchants,
potters
for their guild business. So,
if you can't make a pot, You don't
Yeah.
get into the guild.
So, he's probably still within the Potter's Guild, but he's not serving in an arcane
Perfect.
facility. He's a guard or
Potter.
sort of fighter type. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the guilds in the Smoke, just so people are aware, they have dual functionality, and the Potters Guild literally make pots, but they're also very, very skilled in the arcane arts. Beautiful. So moving down to you, Kyle. Same questions to you.
Once again, I think perhaps how we relate might be better left to when we're introducing our characters, but with connections, I think Gideon be associated with the Beggars Guild.
Okay.
He's got a bit of a wanted background from perhaps a bit of information that did not go over too well. Perhaps something about the Great Banana Bread, which leaning into the primer.
Yeah, you shouldn't talk about banana bread. All will be revealed because no one talks about banana bread. They talk about banana bread. So the Beggars Guild, that'll be Uncle Pockets, who is the guild leader, but it might not be him that you associate. It can be. There are a multitude of beggars. The Smoke is an enormous city with hundreds of thousands of souls that live there. How about attachment with or relationship or knowledge of one of the other players? Do you want to wait until we're in game for that?
I think it'd be a good thing to discuss, but my initial thoughts are perhaps a bit of an informant in the Smoke with the information being passed on with the Beggars Guild.
Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Same question to you, Malcolm.
Thinking that my character, during generation, we had the option of the backgrounds, and mine came up with the sailor, the background of around the docks. So we started to talk about perhaps bringing goods into the city.
Mm-hmm.
An elven character, potentially an outsider, though there are many elves within the city as well. So there's the mercantile house of hazard imports and exports.
Absolutely.
Very much feels in the wheelhouse.
Okay.
Again, maybe not the head of the family, but some connection to that family.
Yeah.
Could be a distant relative, I think, is how I'm going to hook myself into the city.
Oh, very nice. So related to one of the hierarchy of the Hazard family. Excellent. I like it. And any connections with any of the other characters at the moment?
Haven't had chance to mention it yet, but Fliss, my fellow player of an elven character, who also has a background to tell us about shortly, may or may not have stowed away on the ship that I was bringing into the City of London.
Okay.
With or without my knowledge before we left or arrived.
Okay, so with that, it's only fair to offer that up to you, Fliss. Your character, does that sound appropriate?
Yeah, I think that's fun. And Malcolm, you've inadvertently answered a question that I was asking, whether I was from the Smoke or from outside. And I was happy to go either way. So I will go country bumpkin. So I came from somewhere else,
The
which
world
is okay for me.
The world of the Smoke is very big, although we are focusing on the Tales of the Smoke at the moment. I've kind of cheated somewhat, and I do this in a lot of my games, is that the...
18 on a 3d6, Andy? Yes, you do.
No, that's just my natural luck. Just my natural luck. The game world is based upon the same geography as the real world, just like the Smoke is a representation of steampunk fantasy Victorian London. Every time I say that, I add an extra descriptive word to it, so it'll just get even bigger and bigger. So it gives you a nice idea, really. I've got all of it sort of made out. So like the desert lands to the south, which would be a sort of Arabia, and the Sahara are known as dust. We have Borgengast, which is kind of Eastern European. We have Archipelago, which is like the Caribbean. We have the New World, which is kind of like the Americas. It's a fantasy world, so there are not just indigenous, but ancestries are spread across all of those worlds. There is the Court of Five Thunders, which is kind of the Eastern realms. So I'm not asking you now, but you don't just have to be
I was
randomly
thinking more like Norfolk, actually.
Norfolk.
Than
Okay,
just
absolutely.
geographically,
The
just to
Fens.
give you a
So
little flavor.
yeah.
Yeah.
Here's me offering up like the world to you. I'm literally giving you the world, and it's now I want to come from the
No.
Fens.
Fenland Elf,
Yeah.
please. Yes, so I think Ellie's got. I'm very happy to have that connection with Malcolm, Malcolm's character, and I think my NPC connection. I'm not going to be aligned with a guild, but I would like to think that maybe the head jailer at the Nightgate Stockade might have a little bit of a soft spot for Ellie.
Okay. Yeah.
Because she does get into trouble a fair amount, but it's not really her fault. So maybe that person is
So,
a little bit benevolent and might leave the keys.
do you have quite often overnight stays then?
I think I'm a regular. I think I bounce between the Nightgate Stockade and probably Valron's boat,
Yeah.
and that's probably
Beautiful.
those are my safe places.
I love it. I'm getting such a great sense already of things. Yeah.
I'm
Sorry.
I'm wondering if I met Gideon in the Nightgate at any point. I don't know.
It is quite possible, yes.
See.
We may have been cellmates.
We are all coming together, and this is fundamentally what a session zero is. Just asking those very simple questions has started tying together some quite interesting sort of plot lines for the future. All the players' ideas really based off the primer, and it gives you a little bit to work. But already I feel invested in it, and hopefully you do as well as players. Um, so there are these benefits to a session zero basically. I know quite often, and I'm exactly the same thing, that we've got the game, we should, I mean, let's play it now, jump straight in and do it. But by having this, I mean, we've been talking for about 30 minutes. It's not particularly very long.
Half a torch, Andy. It's
Yeah,
quite a
half a
long time.
torch. Yeah, don't let that. I've started the clock already. No, and I think it's been very beneficial. The only really other thing that I would perhaps include in a session zero is house rules, and as we're playing kind of rules as written, just the quick starter rules, there's nothing really that I kind of feel want to change. Although Malcolm did raise a point which I'm more than happy to change, and we've already spoken to it, is about half orcs. Why are half orcs half orcs? Is it not possible to play an orc? Goblin is an ancestry in here. I'm pretty certain that probably orcs are going to be in the full set of core rules. I mean, I might be wrong, but I certainly don't have any issues with orcs being involved. There are quite a lot of nods to the world, the urban setting of the Smoke to Shadowrun. I'm very familiar with trolls and orcs being part of an urban society, and it fits quite nicely for me. So, if you do watch the actual play and you see us referring to Malcolm's character as an orc, it's not a mistake.
Malcolm's character is an elf.
Oh, right. So, what am I talking about? Yeah, this is just generally speaking.
Yeah.
It's still a house rule, but orcs
Mhm.
can be replaced with half orcs as player characters in this.
Yeah.
You are an elf. Well, either that or an orc with a very good disguise skill. We will find
not
out
close to
it.
it.
Yeah, indeed. We will find out. It's late. I've worked very hard today bringing up these glorious graphics and everything else. But very soon we will start an actual play of Shadowdark. Is there any final comments about Session Zeros, either this one that we've just had or Session Zeros in general, that you would like to add to the mix?
I'd like to just reiterate for people who want to have a Session Zero, make sure you get the tone and what you expect of the tone and what the players expect of the tone dead on. I took part in a Curse of Strahd campaign, which was run by uh, a different DM, and while it was explained that it was a gothic horror game, I think the players were expecting more of a sort of 1990s style sort of vampire comedy movie, whereas the storyteller was much more going into like Nosferatu and old vampire horror. And there were some great narrative moments, but in the end the whole campaign broke down because you know the storyteller was going into things like not to ruin Curse of Straw, but there's some you can go in some pretty you can expand on what's in the book.
Yep.
And it can get pretty grim dark. Sorry, wrong IP. But the players were sort of worn down by that and were looking for more of a three kobolds in a trench coat style game, and it ended really poorly. So get that
Absolutely.
tone spot on.
Yeah, 100%. The reason for a Session Zero is to make sure everybody's pushing the right direction. The expectations are the same. And it's not that one thing is right and one thing is wrong. It's just making sure everybody's on the same page. Hopefully you all feel that now for this. You've met the players. We've talked a little bit. In our next video, we will do a prologue to the Shadowdark Tales from the Smoke, where you'll get to meet their characters. Thank you very much for watching. If you get a chance, give us a like and a subscribe. It really helps us out. And I look forward to seeing you all very soon for our actual play. Until then, take care. Stay safe, everybody. Bye for now.